Hey everyone, Mr. T here, and oh my gosh, I am so excited because the new Harry Potter book just came out yesterday. I am super excited. I have been a Harry Potter nerd since I was born, even though the first book technically wasn't out yet. But you know what I mean. I'm so into Harry Potter. Okay, now that that little tangent is over and I put my book up, before I go read it some more, this first video, now I want you to know is, this first video that I'm going to do after the introduction isn't on a specific amendment, but before you turn it off, know that what I'm going to say today is actually a bunch of just frequently asked questions, like what is an amendment? What is the Bill of Rights? You know, do amendments have time limits? Things like that. Things to clarify up and clear things up before we actually get into the amendments. I promise you though, my next video will W-I-L-L, and I'm not talking about a person, it will be on an actual amendment, okay? We're going to start with the First Amendment, going to break it into 5 parts, because there's 5 different things in the First Amendment. I'll explain when we get there, okay? But stick with me, okay? Now, there are a bunch of different things, but like I said, this today is frequently asked questions, okay? That's the coolest looking Y I've ever seen, and that's a butt ton of exclamation points. Because these questions I get asked all the time when amendments come up. And the first one, the biggest one that I probably get asked is, what is an amendment? An amendment is a change to the Constitution. So we have the Constitution of the United States, this little thing right here, okay, and it outlines all the law, or it outlines like how the government works, what Congress is, what the president is, what the courts are, how we add new states, things like that. And anytime we want to change it, we have to add an amendment. So yes, the Constitution can be changed and it's called an amendment. For those of you in Arizona who have to take your citizenship test, and any other state, I don't know if you have to take citizenship tests in other states, but you should, that's a question on there. But anytime you want to change the Constitution, it's called an amendment, okay? Now, here's the other thing. There have been times in history where they've added an amendment, not necessarily to change the Constitution, but to add something to it that was more concrete than a law. Because a regular law, Congress themselves, or the House of Representatives and the Senate, they can pretty much kick that law out. Yes, they have to have the president's approval, but they can still make the president a figurehead depending on if they get enough people to vote. An amendment is different, and that's our next question. How does an amendment become a law? Okay, the way it works is, an amendment starts off in Congress or the states. Okay, the majority, actually every amendment we've had so far has started in Congress. Congress, which is comprised of the House of Representatives and the Senate put together. That's Congress, okay? One of them proposes an amendment, okay? They talk and bicker and argue, and then they finally approve it, and then they send it to the other branch. So if the House of Representatives starts it, they approve it, and it gets sent to the Senate. After the other branch approves it, it is then sent to the states. Then, after it's sent to the states have to approve it themselves. 3/4 of all states, which as of right now is 38 states. So if we wanted to make an amendment right now, 38 states would have to approve it. After they approve it, it becomes a full-blown law, or an amendment. Now, here's the thing. There are 2 ways that states can approve it, okay? One is by state legislatures, which is the state Congress and state senates, the ones at the state level. The other one, and this has only ever been done once in the entire history of the United States, and it was the 19th Amendment. It is basically a convention where the states allow the people, and it varies state by state, but the gist of it is the people are supposed to vote whether they want the amendment or not. It's only ever happened once, and that was the 19th Amendment, and that gets super technical and tricky, because even though it's supposed to be by convention with the people voting, it still gets really murky water-ish area, because each state can say what a convention is in their state. Next thing, Bill of Rights. What is the Bill of Rights? The Bill of Rights is the most important thing in our entire legal system, okay? Because the Bill of Rights are the very, very first 10 amendments, okay? The very first 10 amendments to the Constitution, okay? The Bill of Rights, I'm not going to get too much into the history of them, but you need to know the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments, and all 10 of them were ratified, which means basically approved, in 1791, all at the same time. They were proposed to the states, well, 12 of them were proposed to the states, and 10 of them were approved, okay? That's the Bill of Rights, and I'm going to get into those specifically in the next 10 videos, or technically 15 because I'm breaking the first one up into 5. So stick with me on that. But those, like I said, are the most important amendments, because those are amendments like cops needing a warrant before they can bust in your door. You know, the right to own weapons, the right to speak to your mind, to praise whatever God you want, or no God at all, depending on what you feel like. Those are the Bill of Rights. And here's one giant misconception that people think. People think the Bill of Rights cannot be changed or taken away. And while they are the most important amendments in the entire Constitution, and many would agree with that statement, they are still just normal amendments. So they can be taken out. And the way an amendment gets taken out is by adding a new amendment. This has only ever happened once. The 18th Amendment, which got rid of alcohol in the United States, was then repealed by the 21st Amendment. And I'm sorry, my statement before when I talked about the conventions, it was the 21st Amendment, not the 19th. Sorry, 19th is women's rights to vote. I got it mixed up a little. So next thing, after the Bill of Rights, the next thing is timelines. Okay? Do amendments have deadlines? The answer to that is yes and no. Okay? After an amendment becomes a law, after the minimum number of states needed to ratify it or approve it hits that minimum and it becomes a full-fledged law, it never goes away. Unless in the writing of the amendment, if the amendment says after this amendment has become a law, it expires after this day. If that wording is physically in the amendment, then it expires on that day. Okay? The other thing, now before an amendment becomes a law, so this is while it's still being looked at by the states, not Congress or the Senate, this is after it's been submitted to the states, it has to have a deadline in its writing. Okay? 4 amendments, the 18th, 20th, 21, and 22nd Amendment, all had deadlines in their wording. I think it was every single one of them, I'm pretty sure, was 7 years. So 7 years after it was proposed to the states, if the minimum number of states didn't say yes, then the amendment would be dead and no one could then approve it after that. Okay? If an amendment does not say in its writing, this amendment expires after this day, then it lives on forever. The 27th Amendment, the most recent one we've done, it was actually one of the 12 submitted in the late 1700s. It wasn't ratified until 1992. So over 200 years later, this amendment was just sitting in limbo land waiting for the minimum number of states to ratify. And we'll go in more to that on the 27th Amendment. Now, there are still 4 amendments that are currently not in effect, but that can still be ratified. They did not have a deadline, but they haven't reached the minimum number of states to approve them. There were 2 amendments that did have deadlines, and they did reach the expiration date, which means they can no longer be approved. But there are still 4 that never reached that minimum, and they can still be approved. There was actually even a court case, Coleman v. Miller, in 1939, that fought this exact thing. Coleman and Miller were trying to fight the whole case was based on the child labor law amendment, saying that it was too long of an amendment. I think it was child labor law. I'll have to check that. But this is actually in the 27th Amendment. I go further into this court case in the 27th Amendment, so stay tuned for that. Now, there's 2 more things. The 2 are really short. Where are amendments located in the Constitution? That's a simple one. Article 5 of the Constitution. The Constitution is made up of several different articles. Okay, the first one has to do with Congress. The second one has to do with the president. The third one has to do with the judicial system, like the courts. And my mind just went totally blank on the other ones. But Article 5 of the Constitution is where amendments are located. Okay, how they become laws and all that stuff is right in Article 5. It's actually like that big on a standard pocket-sized Constitution. And then the last one. The last question is a big one. Do amendments affect all citizens? The answer is, like some of the other questions, yes and no. While amendments such as the 13th, the 19th, the 26th, amendments like that, they were created to help a specific set of people. The 13th was created to help free the slaves, which at the time were all black people in the United States. The 19th Amendment was created to help or give women the right to vote. The 26th Amendment was to give people 18 to 20 or to 20 the right to vote. However, the wording of the amendment didn't say this amendment gives women the right to vote. It says this, or it says you can't stop someone from voting based off their gender. So yes, amendments were, when they were first originally ratified or proposed, they were proposed for a specific set of people. However, the way they worded them so it affected everyone. Like the 13th Amendment, which freed the slaves, which in our country was only black people, and it was meant to free blacks in the South. It was still worded saying you can't be forced to have or to be labored based on your race. That's not the actual wording, but it used race. It didn't say blacks or anything like that. It said race. So yes, they were at the time of them being submitted, they were being submitted for a specific group of people, but they were worded so they affected everyone. Now there are 6 amendments. The 17th, the 20th, the 22nd, the 23rd, the 25th, and the 27th, who do deal with a select group of people, like senators or the president or things like that. But those, technically speaking, could still affect the majority of citizens, anyone who is eligible to run for those offices. But other than that, amendments in general do affect all United States citizens, and even some non-citizens. And we'll get into those when we get to those amendments, most specifically the 14th. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are all the frequently asked questions. I know I went over the 5-minute limit. I promise I'll try to stay within the 5-ish minutes on the next video. But I hope you liked it. Stay tuned for the next one. We're going to jump right into the First Amendment. And yeah, stay beautiful, Americans.